Good morning. We're going to start the meeting this morning. I want to tell everyone that we have a audio problem this morning, so I'm going to ask everybody who speaks to get closer to the microphone. In this process, we used it earlier this morning in safety, and it seemed to work very, very well. With that, in the beginning of the meeting, we have public speakers. Mr. Morello, how many public speakers do we have signed up?
Mr. Chairman, we have 28, and the list is coming to me right now. So,
okay.
Give me 1 minute.
Everyone who signed up for the list will get an opportunity to talk. If there are groups together that are talking on the same subject matter, I would encourage you to do it jointly. But if not, you always have the opportunity to do it singly or alone. So with that, who do we have first?
Mr. Chairman, the first speaker, first of all, I want to remind speakers that in the interest of time and fairness to all speakers, we limit everyone to 2 minutes. Please be aware of the clock up front here and the countdown and the warning that you'll get from me and the clock when you have about 30 seconds left. Thank you very much. First speaker is Murray Bowden. He'll be followed by H.P. Schroer, and then Jason Pinheiro.
Good morning. I've been coming to these meetings for, I guess, about 20 years, and I go to the other meetings as well. And for many years, I've stood here and say, well, this is wrong and that's wrong, and why don't you fix this, and why don't you fix the other thing? It's different today.
Thank you.
I would like to tell you people out there that are going to speak after me that this is not the same MTA that was here last year. Things are being done differently. I wear a button here. It was given to me by the chairman of the Thruway Authority years ago, executive director. It says, but we've always done it this way. And I want you to know that these people are not doing it that way anymore. But it takes time to change. There are old habits that have to be relearned. I wear a button here in case I fall down in the shower or somebody comes and gets me. My kids only communicate on telephone. Email is almost out. This world has changed incredibly in my few years, and I don't belong here anymore, and I really don't want to be here anymore. These people and the press has to know that there is change happening here, and it's positive change. I've stood here for years and said, why don't you do this and why don't you do that? It's being done now. It takes time. And I wanted the opportunity to thank all of those people whose names I can't remember for helping and educating me and correcting the mistakes I made over the years, because I made a lot of them. And I'm sorry I did things in the past. I wouldn't have done them had I known what I know now. They were wrong then, but I didn't know any better. Thank you for the opportunity to come back and say, I was different then and I complained then. The responsibility is to say when things change, to do it both ways. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Then Jason Pinheiro, then William Yancey. Sure.
Good morning. For the record, my name is H.P. Schroer. I'm a veteran of World War II, and I live in Manhattan. I applaud the board for hiring Andy Byford and wish him well in his assignment. Kudos to the New York Times in their excellent reporting explaining to the public due to neglect, the MTA finds itself in such a deplorable condition. Last October, I requested the MTA to extend to veterans and their spouses a discount, the equivalent of what is given to seniors. I was never given an answer. For over 100 years, management addressed the neglect of equipment, its subways, but to a lesser degree, the needs of people, and in particular, veterans. Able-bodied young veterans have served this country for over 240 years. And today, they're not recognized for their service because they don't get a discount. I commend you on hiring over 2,000 veterans. You know better than I that veterans are an important part of the vibrant pool of workers the city needs to maintain its economic growth. I know you have a lot on your plate, but ask you again, when will you stop neglecting those veterans who don't work for you and give them a discount? Last November, you said the veteran discount would be addressed after the first of the year. What is your answer?
You have to wrap up,
now?
Mr. Schroer.
I'd like to just have a few of the veterans here so that you can see the faces of the people we're talking for.
Do you want them to introduce themselves, HB?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm Major Carol Barnes, retired Army nurse through 344 Combat Support Hospital, and now I'm affiliated with the National Association of Black Women in the Military, and so many of our troops return home and their family do need reduced cards. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
My name is Douglas Williams. I am a Navy veteran of 8 years. I live in Brooklyn. I am a member of the Vietnam Vets of America, Chapter 32, Queens. I am also the chair of Community Board 3, Brooklyn Veterans Committee.
Thanks, sir.
Good morning. My name is Shanae Fergoso. I am a Prove intern, and I'm here on behalf of the student veterans at the City College.
Thank you.
My name is Ashley Martin. I'm also a Prove intern, and I'm here on behalf of the veterans at Queens College.
Thank you.
My name is Brianna Fitzpatrick. I am also a Prove intern representing the veterans at Hunter College who could not be here but added their signatures to the petition.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is David Montez. I'm also a Prove intern. I'm here on behalf of the veterans of Queens College.
Thank you all. Jason Pinheiro, then William Yancey, and then Mario Bucciati.
Good morning, Joe. Good morning, Ronnie. Good morning, everyone. One new year, welcoming Heidi Byford. That I hope that we could work together as a team. But I'm noticing that the subway is going, instead of forward, is going back like a crab. Because I've been noticing squishy in some subway cars, and this issue has to be addressed. So I strongly recommend each and every member of this board to take the subway, and they could witness for themselves how the subway condition is. And also, I want to apologize to Peter Ward of my comments that I did several months ago. I already reflected. We're starting a new year, a new page, and let's work together as a team. So that's all I have to say for this month.
Thank you very much. William Yancey. Mr. Yancey, you there? A reminder to anyone in the audience, if you would prefer to speak from where you are, we can bring you a portable mic. Just raise your hand when I call on you, rather than going.
Good morning, board, members of the MTA. My name is William Yancey, and I'm a member leader at Community Voices Heard. Our members are low-income families and individuals who see their communities suffering while the city invests tax money into major developments that do not benefit local residents. We congratulate the MTA on the largest award in the history of the authority and hope that this nearly $4 billion taxpayer-funded investment results in decent jobs for our local members living near the Kawasaki facility located right in Yonkers. We look forward to working with Kawasaki to recruit and train a diverse workforce by reaching out to Black and Latino communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yancey. Mario Bucciari, to be followed by Charles Giblin and then Fidel Rella. Mr. Bucciari. Good morning.
Good morning, Board. My name is Mario Bucciari. I'm the president of the United Transit Leadership Organization. On the behalf of UTLO, I would like to welcome Mr. Byford to the MTA family. We are looking forward to having a strong and productive working relationship with you. The UTLO is a recently certified union representing over 400 superintendents and assistant general superintendents in the Department of Buses. Additionally, UTLO's membership includes general superintendents, assistant general managers, and other titles. When MTA Bus was formed, each company had its own pension system. At that time, the authority assured employees that pensions would be corrected to match MAPSTOA and New York City Transit. This never happened. Instead, MTA bus managers have been denied pension enhancement even though the work performed is identical. This past June, the board finally took action to improve pensions of our MTA bus members. At that time, the board took two steps. First, the board adjusted the pension multiplier. The revised multiplier does not come close to parity for MTA bus managers. Second, the board adopted a final average salary formula, but for service after January 1st, 2017. This completely leaves out many years of prior service. The board's June action leaves out numerous members who now have pensioned and received only 401k programs. We asked here if the board would correct this situation and as quickly as possible. Our members have waited too long, and this board must not lose sight of this important issue. I thank you for your time and consideration, and have a blessed day.
Thank you, Mr. Bucciari. Okay, thank you. Can we move on, please? Could we move on, please? The bell is not ringing when speakers approach the 30-second mark, so please be aware of the time and the clock. Thank you. Charles Giblin, then Fidel Rella, and then Dennis Carlson.
Good morning, Board, member of the Board of Directors. My name is Charles Giblin. I am a superintendent with the MTA Bus Company. I presently work for the Safety and Training Department at a Zariga training facility. Prior to this, I was employed by Queens Surface Corporation as an operator from 1978 until the takeover in 2005. I was also union chairman at the College Point Depot during the transition from private to public. I had the opportunity to work with many dedicated managers from both the private lines and MTA to make the transition smooth and without disruption of service to the riding public. I had the privilege to be one of the volunteer bus operators that responded to New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. I even gave an interview to the New York Times on behalf of the MTA. After being approached by many senior managers from the MTA, I decided to make the change from union to management. This was not an easy decision, but after being informed by these same managers that I would not lose any of my benefits and would eventually be placed into the MTA's final average salary pension program, I decided this would be better for me and my family. I have since discovered that this was the wrong decision. I now find myself in a position that I will receive a pension that is significantly lower than a bus operator's. I gave up my union title in order to better myself and my family, only to be treated as a second-class citizen. Our complaints have been ignored or disregarded. We fail to put in for promotions, as we will not receive any increase in our pension, unlike our fellow managers on the TA and OA side. It is disheartening to come to work on a daily basis and listen to my fellow employees on both the union and management side talk about them when they will be retiring and what they will be receiving.
You have 30 seconds, Mr. Giblin.
This is part of the reason why managers, and really managers, had to form a union in order to have somebody to deal with these issues. Working at the training center, I have trained dozens of new bus operators, TA, OA, and MTA. I work out at different depots on a daily basis. I will also represent the training center at arbitration hearings for all 3 divisions. I enjoy working with my fellow managers in all 3 companies, but don't understand how, if we are doing the same work, we do not receive the same compensation and benefits. I don't know if you, the board members, were aware of the problems with the MTA bus managers.
I have to ask you to conclude,
I am here today
Mr.
and hope
Giblin.
that you'll be able to intervene on our behalf. We're a small group of employees, but we give our all every day to make our transit system work. Is it too much to ask that the MTA treat us fairly and with the respect we deserve? I would like to thank you for any assistance that you can offer.
Thanks, Mr. Giblin. Okay, all right, great work. Fidel Arella.
Good morning. My name is Fidel Rella. I am an MTA Bus
Mr.
General
Rella.
Superintendent of
Mr. Rella,
Transportation.
Excuse me. I just wanted to remind your colleagues that for all of you, I know you're here in unity, to keep to 2 minutes, and maybe we can cut back on the time that we spend applauding one another. Thank you.
Good morning again. My name is Fidel Rella. I am an MTA Bus General Superintendent of Transportation working at the MJQ Depot, a MAPSTOA facility in charge of managing the bus track operations in Manhattan for New York City Transit. In 2005, when the MTA merged its operations with the private bus companies of New York City, promises were made to us by upper management that we would be put into the same pension plan as MAPSTOA and that our salaries would be made equal to our New York City Transit counterparts. Then President Tom Savage and CTO Joseph Smith selected us, the original MTA bus managers, to help them put together the MTA bus company that it is today. The New York City Transit managers of that time had little to no knowledge of how the private bus companies operated and what the work rules were. We, your original MTA bus managers, stepped up to the plate to help and do whatever we could to make this company succeed and transition without any problems. We all worked endless hours and we spent less time at home. Hurricane Katrina came, and some of us left our families to go down to New Orleans with a convoy of buses to help our country, while the rest of us took on double duties back at home and continued to formulate the MTA bus company. Since then, we were told over and over with continuous promises that we were all going to be taken care of with the same pension and pay. 13-plus years later, we are still waiting. Yes, we are mad, angry, and very disappointed. How can a company treat its managers like this? We manage New York City Transit employees and work side by side with New York City Transit managers, but yet they have a pension they can retire on, and we have very little or no pension at all. Every day we see the smiles on their faces and hear their conversations on retirement. Without a secure retirement plan like you and everyone else in the MTA has, how can we plan to retire? This is just not fair. Back in June of 2017, the MTA made yet another promise, a promise we thought would finally put a closure to this issue, but all it was just another slap in the face. Please take a look at the pension formula that the MTA is presenting to us. Once you do, you will see how ridiculous it is. We are not looking for anything more. All we want is to be treated equal. But yet, here we are today, having to use another personal day in the hopes that our voices will be heard. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rella. Dennis Carlson to be followed by Steve Martini and then Tony Cipollini. Mr. Carlson.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dennis Carlson, General Superintendent of Transportation for the MTA Bus Company. I've been in the transportation business for 37 years, 24 of those years for a private bus line company that was taken over in February 2005 to form the newly made MTA Bus Company. February 28th of 2005 was the date when I was informed I had to sign an offer letter to become an employee of the MTA Bus Company, which I did. I was informed that day by a representative from Human Resources that the 401k plan I was enrolled in at that time should be rolled over into an IRA, and within 1 year's time, the MTA Bus Company would put me into the state pension plan, where I could then roll over the IRA into that plan. That never happened. On or about June 21st of 2017, this board voted on and approved a pension resolution for MTA bus managers and administrators. After learning of this resolution, I started to plan for my retirement, which was originally to be January 1st, 2018. I sent emails, made phone calls to the pension department, asking simply a simple question: what am I entitled to? The response I would receive over and over again is that my situation hasn't been resolved as yet. On or about November 27th, I received a 7-page unsigned letter in the mail from the MTA Bus Company stating that this was going to be my pension that the MTA Board voted on. Problem that I had with this letter was that it seems I don't seem to fit into any category spelled out in this letter. When I again contacted the pension department, I was told my situation has not yet been resolved. So as of December 1st, 2017, I realized I would have to push back my retiring date to February 1st, 2018. On December 15th, I received an email reply from the pension department stating not only have they not resolved my 401k issue, but because I am a member involved in a lawsuit against the MTA Bus Company, which I was only asking for equitable pension that was promised us back in 2005, my situation would not be resolved due to legal ramifications.
You have to wrap it up, Mr. Carlson.
I am a 67-year-old man, not in good health, and if I were to leave this company without a pension, I would lose my house and not to be able to provide for my family. One last note, that the pension proposed for this MTA managers is less than the lowest paid employee in MTA Bus. On top of that, the FAS pension of the proposal only will be recognized February 1st, 2017. What happened to the prior 12 years I've been working for this company? Why am I and my colleagues being treated as new employees? In closing, I would like to thank the board for attempting to help us in this matter, but feel that when you approve this resolution, you were not totally informed about our situation. I especially would like to thank Mr. Irick, whose tireless efforts to try and make things right are much appreciated. But in the end, ladies and gentlemen, the people who are speaking here today feel grossly disrespected, and our lives have been adversely affected. Thank you.
Steve Martini, please. Steve Martini here. Can I ask you to keep to the 2-minute limit, please?
I understand that. Good morning. My name is Stephen Martini. You may recognize my name from prior emails. Some 13 years ago, 7 private bus lines that operated in the 5 boroughs were taken over by the MTA, and hence MTA Bus Company was born. At that time, we were presented by representatives of the MTA with an offer letter that we were required to sign to continue employment, and also an explanation of our benefits, including pension. Standing along with me are some of the team of 13 that remain from Queens Surface, who to this date only have a 401k pension plan. This is contrary to what we were told. Fast forward to June 21st of 2017, through the actions of Darrell Irick, Ronnie Hakem, and the board, to whom we are truly thankful for their action, you passed a resolution that one could conclude was thought to remedy the disparate treatment of the MTA Bus non-represented managers. The resolution falls short of getting a pension plan that equals the lowest paid entry-level represented employee, and substantially short of our counterparts in New York City Transit and MAB STOA. Further, you just heard from a member who's been attempting to retire for the last 7 months, and we continually receive conflicting unsigned letters from a BSC pension group. To us, this is either a continuance of a thoughtful act to deny us a pension, which, by the way, resulted in a lawsuit against the MTA, which is still active, or the inability to resolve the issue. We believe that it is a good combination of both. We continually hear that it's a complex issue. Well, in our humble opinion...
You have 30 seconds, sir.
In our humble opinion, after 13 years and the vast resources of the MTA, someone should have figured it out. Let me conclude with, in your private businesses, would you allow this to happen to a small group of employees? Could you accept the excuse of a complex issue being unresolved after 13 years? Would you accept the cost of a lawsuit where you have continually lost all arguments to have the suit dismissed? We continually hear that we are one regional bus entity,
that means you're out of time,
except
sir.
when it comes to our pension benefit. Hence, a conclusion that there is a deliberate action by a person or persons to block a very small group of people the pension benefits that we were all told. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony Cipollini.
Good morning. My name is Antonio Cipollone. I'm the General Superintendent of Safety and Environmental Management working at MAP STOA Gun Hill Bus Depot. I, too, am a former Queens Surface manager without a pension. 13 years ago, next month, on the day of the takeover, the former Chief Executive Officer of the MTA Bus Company, Joseph Smith, met with myself and a number of senior managers from Queens Surface, stating that we just hit a home run with the MTA taking us over. He went on to say we would have a better health plan, we'd have a better organizational structure, more professional promotional opportunities, and a final average salary pension plan like the MAP-STOA plan. Well, I'm here today to let you know that not only didn't we get a home run, we didn't even get up to bat. We were told and received in writing that we would not be treated any differently than any other MTA employee, but unfortunately we have been and continue to be treated unfairly. We're a small group of dedicated, hardworking professional managers. We work in the same positions and depots as TAOA managers. We are asked to step up and assume acting roles of AGMs, chief officers, deputy general managers, yet they have a final average salary pension and we have unfulfilled promises. Just as our TAOA counterparts receive a final average salary pension, so should we. Again, we should not be treated we should be treated equally, and we are not, and that's discriminatory. We were heartened to hear that Managing Director Ronnie Hakim and MTA President Darrell Irick presented to the board a pension resolution to resolve this issue. Unfortunately, the former Queens Surface employees were never part of the MTA DB plan. The resolution further states the Chief Employee Relations Administrative Officer would determine eligibility under the benefit enhancement. I don't believe this was ever taking place. Instead, we received the same letter dated November 21st that every other MTA bus employee received. It states that we have to turn over our entire 401k plan. Obviously, IRS rules don't allow that.
Cipollini, can you conclude?
And it's an employee salary deferral program. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Joe Kennedy, then John Pavetto, then Christy Vidier. Joe Kennedy, then John Pavetto, then Christy Vidier.
Welcome,
Morning.
President Byford. Thanks to the Honorable Board for giving me this opportunity to speak today. My name is Joe Kennedy. I'm a superintendent of transportation and road operations. I'm one of those employees who responds to major collisions, detours, buses stuck in snow, subway shutdowns, and a host of other situations. I'm here today for one reason: my pension. My pension benefit, or more specifically, my substandard benefit. After 39 years of service that began in 1979, I feel like I'm being held hostage. 2 months ago, I requested an estimate of my pension benefit through the Business Service Center. To date, I have heard nothing. Based on a memorandum the board issued in June of 2017, my benefit as an MTA bus company employee will be approximately $26,000 a year less than a New York City Transit or MAP-STOA employee with the exact same salary and longevity. I should note that I have been paying into the pension system for 39 years. This organization is quite adept at sending out emails that state people matter, conform to the respectful workplace policy, and our people are our greatest asset. Today, I am requesting that the board back up those statements with action. How disrespectful is it when employees I supervise laugh when they find out my pension benefit is 40% less than theirs? How demoralizing is it when I receive retirement announcements for coworkers who routinely have 5 to 10 years less on the job than I do? How unfortunate for me to have taken a promotion 10 years ago, in no small part due to the promises of the then Senior Vice President and Chief of Staff, who stated confidently that we, the newly promoted managers, would go into either the MAP-STOA or headquarters plan. That promotion has turned out to be a mistake in light of the gains that the then unionized workforces have made. In spite of this treatment, I have to state here and now that I still love my job. I have the good fortune to work with great people in a great department. Today, I am asking this board to fix this discriminatory policy once and for all. Respect our longevity, respect our contribution, respect our dedication to this organization. I thank you.
Thank you very much. John Pavetto. Then Chris Dividier.
Good morning, Board. I'm using the good mic. My name is John Pavetto. I was your Chief Security Officer of Security, Electronic Support, and Revenue Control with MTA Bus. I started my career as a bus operator and rose through the ranks, finally working directly for the president of the agency. As you may know, because of the merger with the private bus companies, there were a lot of issues to be resolved. One of the last of these issues were the manager's pension. And now, 13 years later, the issue still has been resolved. Even though the board has passed the resolution this past June, it didn't even come close to resolving the issue. Briefly, the pension department put forth to you a resolution that you approved this past June that gave the MTA bus managers a slight increase. That didn't even come close to level the playing field. To give you a clear example, okay, a local 100 union employee currently gets a pension of approximately 38% more than an MTA bus manager. Throughout the whole MTA, the managers throughout the whole agency get 50% more than an MTA bus manager. They stand side by side with these managers every day doing the exact same job throughout their whole career. The differences are stark. These managers have been patient, waiting over 13 years for the pension department to fix this mess. It's obvious they can't do it alone. Promise after promise has led us all here today.
You have 30 seconds
Everyone
left,
in the
Mr. Pavetto.
agency has known and agreed, including your president, how unfair this has been. And this June's resolution was a slap in the face to all your managers. And then, the icing on the cake, they left out the retirees who've been waiting and the veterans who've been waiting over 13 years for the agency to fix this. I put in 41 years of service to the people of New York, and they did this. They did not even include myself or the veterans who have served this country. How is it that a bus operator gets a better pension than myself? And that's where I started my career, as a bus operator.
Thanks, Mr. Pavetto.
We have
You
been
to wrap
waiting
up.
patiently for 13 years for the pension department to solve this issue. And I know the board believes that you fixed it, but unfortunately the resolution passed doesn't even come close. Not only is it not fixed, but the MTA bus veterans are the only ones in the state employees
We have to move on,
that
Mr.
do not have
Pavetto. Please
veteran
wrap it
benefits.
up.
Our pension department unfairly took it upon themselves to decide to exclude the retirees and the veterans. Even in the June resolution, their inability to correct this situation is one of the reasons MTA bus managers' morale is so low. Please remember, if you take care of your managers, the managers will take care of this agency. Please help us right this wrong that everyone in the agency has known about for 13 years. Your managers, retirees, and veterans are appearing here today to ask you to fulfill the promise that was made to us in 2005 and repeated year after year to us. I am asking the board to please direct your pension department and Maggie Connor to work with us to resolve these issues, because obviously they can't do it by themselves.
Can I please ask you to wrap
For
up,
more
Mr.
than past
Pavetto?
13 years. I have faith in the current board members will help us correct this situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Christy Vadir, then Omar Khwaja, and Ms. Vadir? Christy Vadir, then Omar Khwaja, then Omar Vera.
If any board members have any questions, we're here.
Yeah, outside, please. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Members of the MTA Board. My name is Christy Veeder. I live in Long Island City, and I've been a New York City transit rider for the past 20 years. I would like to commend Governor Cuomo for prioritizing the delivery of highly innovative, cutting-edge trains that will better serve the needs of New York City's surging ridership. I would also like to acknowledge the leadership of the MTA and their work with Kawasaki to get the most aggressive and achievable train delivery schedule possible. This is an important first step towards modernizing our transit system and ensuring that New Yorkers have access to reliable, affordable, world-class public transit. Good transit, I'm sure many people in this room will agree with me, is essential to ensuring that communities throughout the 5 boroughs are connected to good jobs and affordable housing. We hope to see Kawasaki work with key constituents such as community, labor, and education groups to ensure that workers building our trains have the skills needed to build high-quality and reliable trains. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Vedder. Got it right that time. Omar Khwaja, then Omar Vera, and Malika Connor. Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Hopefully this is a good mic. My name is Omar Khwaja. I'm from Jobs to Move America. I'm the New York Campaigns Director. We're thrilled to have had the opportunity to partner with the MTA and Governor Cuomo on developing the U.S. employment plan for the New York City Transit subway contract. We'd like to congratulate Governor Cuomo and the MTA staff on leading the country with the most robust U.S. employment plan program in the nation, which will result in hundreds of U.S. jobs. And we look forward to working with Kawasaki to ensure that the firm's jobs programs live up to the spirit and intent of the U.S. employment policy. We expect that Kawasaki will commit to building the partnerships with community, labor, and local schools to create jobs pipelines into families supporting career path jobs, training, and apprenticeships for communities of color, women, and people formerly incarcerated. Thank you for your time.
Oh, yeah, you've never enforced it. Thank you very much. Omar Vera, good morning. Then Malika Connor, and then Shane Anderson.
Good morning and Happy New Year, MTA Board. Welcome to the first full board meeting of 2018. Well, wow, we have quite a lot to discuss, but first of all, I support the bid to Kawasaki for the R211 trains that are desperately needed on both the A train and the R train. It is way past time for the R32 to go. Even though we will miss its point of view front and back, but it needs to go. Therefore, we need to modernize the system. And second, we do know we have to welcome the brand new member of the MTA, President Andy Byford of New York City Transit. Welcome, sir. We have seen and heard great deeds that you have performed on various transit systems throughout the Anglosphere, and we hope that you will make the MTA great again. Did you like the letter I gave you? Thank you. And last but not least, as with the previous speakers, we must keep improving benefits, both to veterans and to the MTA bus managers. They mentioned that. And like I said, and like others say, it must go forward. Thank you, and see you around.
Thank you. See you around. Malika Connor, to be followed by Shane Anderson, and then Yesenia Torres. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the MTA Board. My name is Malika Connor, and I'm lead organizer for ALIGN, the Alliance for a Greater New York. ALIGN is an organization that builds coalitions between community, labor, and environmental groups to address the root causes of economic injustice and create a more just and sustainable New York. We believe, if done right, this nearly $4 billion public contract for the R211s has the opportunity to significantly lift communities that have suffered most from discrimination, economic inequality, and environmental degradation. We call on Kawasaki to work with local communities to ensure that its commitments around good jobs are met, and that this historic award provides Black and Brown communities a fair shot at accessing the good manufacturing jobs that will be created. This contract signifies a step in the right direction, and we look forward to seeing more improvements to our public transportation system, especially more energy-efficient transit equipment, which includes prioritizing the use of electric vehicles and any expansion of the MTA's current diesel and CNG bus fleet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Connor, Shane Anderson, Yesenia Torres, and then I believe it's Aisha Lerabord. Shane Anderson, good morning.
Thank you. Good morning, board members, members of the public, and welcome Transit President Byford. I'm Shane Anderson, community organizer for accessoride issues at the Center for Independence of the Disabled, New York. Sydney is a member of the Accessoride Reform Group, also called ARG. Think frustration. Our work is funded by the New York Community Trust. Mr. Byford, as you heard on Monday, our subways remain largely inaccessible to many New Yorkers with disabilities. Many of those New Yorkers instead depend on Accessoride, the MTA's paratransit service. In the past year, Accessoride users have testified at board meetings repeatedly, telling their horror stories about late pickups, no pickups, trips that take hours, missed job interviews, missed meetings, and the list goes on and on. As an Accessoride organizer, I hear from people with disabilities both visible and invisible, such as bipolar disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder, about chronic lateness, circuitous routes, and safety issues with accessorized vehicles. I also hear about an application process where both applicants with visible and invisible disabilities are required to demonstrate their ability to walk up and down steps. Even those individuals who are applying with non-visible disabilities, for whom their ability to walk up and down steps physically is not their issue. The issue is their ability to successfully and safely navigate the system. In other words, Accessoride is a broken system. Sir, you might have thought that your big job here, I'm almost done, was to fix the subways or the buses. But I can tell you, Accessoride is as big and as crucial a challenge. It's been in bad shape for decades. We are committed to reforming Accessoride so it works for the people who depend on it daily. Accessoride users are paying the price for this dysfunction. The lack of accessible transportation is the second biggest barrier to employment for people with disabilities. Sir, you've got a big job ahead of you, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yesenia Torres, and then Tasha Leribor. Ms. Torres, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Board members and welcome.
Hold it very close. We're not here picking up much. There you go.
Good morning, board members, and welcome, President. My name is Yesenia Torres. I'm from the Brooklyn Center for the Independence of the Disabled, also a board member of the Accessoride Reform Group, R. As you heard my colleague, Accessoride is a plague with problems. I should know, I used it for 8 years. I've been left behind for hours in the middle of the night. I've been picked up late with no notice. I've turned the city in a tour bus going out of the way through neighborhoods that aren't on my way, making me late for meetings. The lousy service has made my life miserable and made it hard to get around. The good news is that since ARC started 2017, we've seen some changes. Progress. Accessoride is still a horror show, but Chairman Loda and Vice Chair Boyd, many MTA board members, and the Accessoride staff have started on the hard work to improve the reform Accessoride. And a year ago, Governor Cuomo prevented a fare hike that would have penalized us, unfortunately, who were at the very beginning. Last May, we outlined 5 key ways that we thought Accessoride could improve. We called the New York City Transit and the MTA for number 1. Release comprehensive, accurate data about the quality of service, complaints, and their measurements. The dashboard brought to the board this month tackles some of these concerns, but complaints are still ignored, as the audit by New York City Comptroller Springer showed on Sunday. You gotta do a better job. Number 2, improve dispatch and on-time performance and other aspects of the service quality. One thing we urge that is shared rides that take people out of their way unnecessarily be eliminated. We're counting on you to make that happen. Streamline, and number 3, streamline and make applications and appeal procedures fair. Many people with invisible disabilities find the process discriminates against them, and we look forward to working with you to reform this. Number 4, provide on-demand service so riders can get a ride whenever and whenever they want. Riders must now reserve a day in advance. The good news is that a very limited pilot program of on-demand service started in November. I'm a part of the program, and it's a great stride forward.
Can you wrap up, please, Ms. Torres?
The neighborhoods with few accessible vehicles, it's not working. Number 5, implement reform proposals including more integration into taxi systems, which is slated to become 50% wheelchair accessible in 2020. We urge you to work with the City Taxi and Limousine Commission to get more accessible taxis on the road. Thank you for your time. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Ms. Torres. Tasha Leribor. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Tasha Larabors. I'm a peer advocate at the Center for the Independence of the Disabled, New York. I've been denied Accessoride because my disability is invisible, and unlike my mother who does use Accessoride, I'm able to walk up and down the steps. I have complex partial seizures, the key term being complex, because I no longer sense or know how severe my seizures will be. More than once I've had a seizure on the train. I used the 2 train, and by chance I live by one of the 17 stops with an elevator out of the 49 express stops on the 2 lines. I had a seizure so severe that I almost fell and was too weak to go down the stairs. My sister guided me to the elevator, which is not always in service, and we took a cab home. In another incident, I had a seizure where I went up 2 flights of stairs, swiped my Metro card, and made it to where I usually stand on the platform. But I have no recollection because I blacked out. My disability is a daily challenge because I am always in fear of having it at unexpected times. Complex partial seizures, unlike grand mal seizures, often go unnoticed and unrecognized. The name of my disorder speaks for itself. It is complex. And as complex and as complicated and scary as it is, I'm not considered disabled enough to use Accessoride. Now is the time for the MTA to step up and take action on accessibility for both the visible and invisibly disabled. Thank you.
Mary Parison, then Mary Kissinger, then Tony Murphy. Mary Parison's here, right? Okay. Yep. Then Mary Kissinger, then Tony Murphy. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Mary Parison, Chair of Civics United for Railroad Environmental Solutions. I obtained a copy of your RFP for freight locomotives through New York State Contractor Reporter yesterday. Unfortunately, this RFP exemplifies the MTA procurement process described in a New York Times article, "The Most Expensive Mile of Subway Track on Earth." Like other examples in the article, this RFP has little competition, generous contracts, a preferred vendor, an absurdly complex RFP, inflated consulting fees, and a revolving door between MTA and consultants. I ask you to stop this RFP from going forward. On the reverse side of this page, you'll see where your RFP states on page 27 that the engine shall be manufactured by Cummins, Caterpillar, or railroad-approved equal. We can find no evidence that Cummins has an engine in this class, which leaves Caterpillar. The RFP makes other potential bidders navigate a quixotic RFP process devised to shut them out. They must petition the MTA LIRR for its discretionary access to the playing field Caterpillar stands on from day one as a preferred vendor. LIRR's MTA's 2013 procurement also favored the same vendor. And in December 2017, your preferred vendor pled guilty in federal court and paid $25 million for cheating customers and throwing evidence in the Pacific Ocean. You promised our communities the cleanest locomotives through an open, fair competition. Will you stand for another wasteful procurement that is rigged for a preferred vendor and wait for someone to be indicted? Will you stand for the STV milking the MTA and New York State taxpayers for hundreds of thousands more dollars for the next 18 months? Stand up for rational, lawful procurements that also protect the well-being of communities and taxpayers. Thank you.
Kissinger, Tony Murphy, and then Pedro Valdez Rivera. Mary Kissinger?
Good morning. I'm Mary Kissinger from the People's MTA.
Good morning.
And I came today to talk about access. The ADA, the Americans for Disabilities Act, is a law, and it should be looked up to. It should be followed. The MTA has not provided elevators for the subways, and we need elevators in order to get around. We need elevators in order to get to the subway, to get into the subways. in order to use them. Once we're in there, we have other problems with access in that the platform is not level with the floor of the subway car, so it's difficult at times to enter the actual car. So I'm urging you to please take care of this situation. And I was at a court hearing the other day for the MTA was being sued by passengers because the station that they wanted to use was renovated, but the renovation did not include an elevator, and so the disabled customers were not able to use that subway station. And I think it's incumbent on you to make all stations accessible. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kissinger. Tony Murphy, then Pedro Valdez Rivera, then Miriam Fisher. Good morning.
Hi, I'm Tony Murphy with the People's MTA. I find it necessary for us to state that we support all the workers who do the hard, dangerous work of keeping the subway running, those who are there today, the transit workers, the recent revelations in the Times that showed that money is being looted out of the system and not used to fix signals, fix switches, fix motors, fix air conditioning systems. It's going everywhere else and making other people rich. And this is a public transportation. It's made for the people, and that's why the People's MTA says that the subways belong to the people. And I find it necessary to quote from some of the figures that were in that Times article. Debt service, which is money that banks, when they collect interest on that debt service, that's money they collect for doing literally nothing. Debt service, as listed in the article by Jim Dwyer in the Times, is $83 a second, $7 million a day, $2 billion a year. $1 billion is 1,000 million. That's how much money is going just to pay off these debt, and yet the conclusions at the end of these articles were that there's too many workers, that it's the transit workers or the sandhogs, and the implication in the op-ed pieces afterwards in the Daily News and the Times were that there's too many workers working on these systems. And when the truth is that there's not enough workers, we need double the amount of workers to create a public works program to make public transit accessible. We need a public works program to make to give an elevator, a working elevator, to every station in New York City. We need a public works program to make Access-a-Ride work the way it's supposed to. So this notion that you're going to blame the workers for the contracts and the schemes that this board is responsible for creating, that's false. And the People's MTA stands with the transit workers. We stand with the workers that are here today in their fight for pension justice. And we are calling for a public works program to make public transit 100% accessible.
Thank you. That was easier than I thought. Pedro Valdez Rivera, then Miriam Fisher, then John Orcutt.
Good morning, MTA. My name is Pedro Valdez Rivera Jr. I'm a private citizen for Bedford-Stuyvesant, and I'm here to talk about the procurement of the MTA board is going to vote on the R211, the new R211 subway cars. I generally support it because I can tell the MTA have a great relationship with Kawasaki, and since way back to 1982 when Kawasaki created over 2,000 subway cars and create hundreds and hundreds of jobs in the Yonkers facility plant, and I can tell they have Kawasaki has a good tendency to finish delivering those subway cars and modernizing them to the future on time and on budget. So I've definitely looked forward to the $4 billion contract, and let's hope that the MTA board will approve on this. And one more thing, Andy Byford, welcome, congratulations as a member of the as a president of the New York City Transit. I watched all those YouTube clips on the Toronto Transit Commission, and you turned the whole city around and gained trust of the Toronto Transit Commission. Honestly, New York City is much tougher than Toronto. I hope you're going to turn around in the not too distant future. I wish you
best of good luck. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, sir. Miriam Fisher, John Orcutt, Colin Wright. Good morning.
Miriam Fisher, a longtime subway rider, former employee at International Center for the Disabled, and familiar with many of the stories we heard about Access-a-Ride and its unreliability. And I'm someone with a bad back and a bad knee, maybe an invisible disability. I applaud the announcement at the end of the last session by Commissioner Loda that a committee is being formed to investigate issues around accessibility. I'm requesting a progress report on that committee after the speakers today to see is this on the radar, is this on the agenda, and what's happening with that. In terms of accessibility, I expand the request for elevators to include escalators and winding ramps, such as at the Union Square station, where possibly elevators can't be retrofitted to old stations. 20% of our stations are now accessible. We're 10th. New York City is 10th on the list of big cities in accessibility, and other cities such as Boston, Philadelphia, and so on have increased their accessibility to 70–80%. I saw the new proposed demo train at Hudson Yards a month or two ago. I saw the gangway the opening between the different cars, and I've read recently that that's going to add room for about 55 new passengers on each train. At the same time, seats are being eliminated, so we're going in one direction, talking about accessibility, then talking about eliminating the seats. I propose adding more fold-up seats to make it possible for people who do need to sit. Not everybody would use them. It would still open up space, but it would give the alternative of having seats for people who do need to sit and have that accommodation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fisher. John Orcutt, then Colin Wright, then Monica Bartley. Morning, Mr. Orcutt.
Good morning, members of the board and senior staff. I'm John Orcutt with Transit Center. Before there was Con Ed Inflategate, there was the New York Times expose on runaway MTA construction costs. When you approve spending for a project, it's now an open and legitimate question how much of taxpayers and riders' money is being spent on transit improvements and how much is devoted to the New York premium of unnecessary labor costs and huge markups for consultants. We appreciate that the board has launched a task force on procurement to recommend reforms. But with proposals for new transit funding being debated daily and Governor Cuomo proposing congestion pricing, it's extremely urgent that you show the public that you're making progress to ensure that MTA funds are well used and not wasted. Nearly every month, at least one of you complains about having insufficient time to review a large volume of information presented by the staff, including recommendations to approve huge contracts. Do yourself and the public a big favor today and vote yourself more time to review contract and budget documents. Require the staff to get you those materials much earlier than they do presently. You don't need the chairman's permission to do that. You don't need the staff's permission to do that. Make a motion and vote on it. Act like the governing body of this organization. Be the governing body of this organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Colin Wright, and Monica Bartley, and Darrell Perlstein. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Colin Wright with Transit Center's Access Denied campaign. I'm here today to call on the board to reject Enhanced Station Initiatives Packages 4 and 8, which will close 8 subway stations for a year without adding new ADA-compliant elevators. To vote yes on this expenditure is to ignore the needs of a large segment of your ridership. The Station Enhancement Initiative is a misplaced priority. $1 billion spent without a single newly ADA-compliant station. Meanwhile, there will never be a better time to add elevators than when stations are already closed for renovations. The short-sightedness of this initiative is more evidence that the MTA has no strategy or plan for achieving greater accessibility throughout the system. Chair Loda and New York City Transit have begun talking about accessibility as a higher priority. The proof will be in whether new elevator construction is central to any major station renovation moving forward. This board has a prerogative to demand that staff offer ESI packages that include elevators, or else explain why elevators are an impossibility without using cost as an excuse. Thank you to members who declined to vote for these ESI packages during Monday's Transit Committee meeting, and please do the right thing by voting no on packages 4 and 8 today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's see, where are we? Monica Bartley, Darrell Pearlstein, and then Laramie Flick.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Monica Bartley, Community Outreach Organizer at the Center for Independence of the Disabled, New York. People who use wheelchairs, walkers, scooter, or other mobility devices are denied access to almost 80% of the subway stations in New York City. New Yorkers rely on the subway system daily to commute to and from work, attend school, access healthcare services, take part in social, civic, and cultural events, and visit friends and family. Yet, people with mobility disabilities or other disabilities are barred from using what is considered one of the most efficient means of getting around town. Travel in New York City can be very challenging to people who use wheelchairs. It requires a lot of planning beforehand and generally takes more time to complete a trip and get to our destination. As a wheelchair user, I recently tried to use the subway from Bowling Green to get to Union Square after a meeting during the workday. There was no elevator at my destination. I went to 2 other stations and found that the elevators were also broken. There's no way for riders to know when an elevator is broken. The listings on the MTA website are unreliable and they are not done in real time. Even the station attendants did not know where the next accessible elevator was. After traveling approximately 1.5 hours underground, I finally found a functioning elevator at the Fulton Street station. I exited and made my way to the bus stop, right back to where I started. Lack of transportation access is a violation of our rights and the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's a barrier to employment. We call on the MTA to create a comprehensive plan to include the construction of elevators in all their renovation plans and devise a strategy to build elevators at all subway stations. We want to see a timeline with clear goals, including a plan for handling elevator outages, repairs, and notifying customers of travel alternatives. Thank you very much.
Ms. Bartley. Our final 3 speakers are Darrell Pearlstein, Laramie Flick, and Iman Ramawi.
Good morning, Chair and board members. My name is Danny Pearlstein. I'm Policy and Communications Director at the Riders Alliance. Last Friday, the Fix NYC panel recommended the state adopt a strong congestion pricing regime focused on Manhattan's Central Business District. The panel proposed a sustainable and progressive revenue source capable of funding the long-term modernization of the subway system. Governor Cuomo deserves credit for charging the panel, but a report is not a plan, and a plan is not its implementation. It is now up to Governor Cuomo to embrace the Fix NYC proposal and endorse it to the legislature such that it is enacted through the current fiscal year 2019 budget season. Short-term fixes, though laudable, are insufficient to the challenge the system faces. The most recent data point to continued service deterioration. For example, on weekends, where major incidents rose 14.3%, service delivered fell 2.3 percentage points, and trains delayed increased a whopping 20.3% in November 2017 compared with November 2016. In sum, while the governor needs to continue pursuing the Subway Action Plan, he must also adopt the Fix NYC panel funding recommendations as his own and present a credible plan to modernize the transit system. Most importantly, he needs to use his renowned political skills to pass a strong congestion pricing plan, which can alone provide a long-term sustainable revenue source to fund the modernization our transit system needs. There is no way to truly fix the problems riders experience every day without a deep overhaul of MTA equipment that will cost billions of dollars to achieve. Only by pushing it through the legislature this season can Governor Cuomo avoid another year of rage from fed-up transit riders. Thank you.
Thank you. Laramie Flick, and our final speaker after that, Iman Ramawi. Good morning.
My name's Laramie Flick. I'm a homeowner in Bushwick. I live closest to the J train, but the L train is also going down, obviously, next year, and it's going to be a nightmare there. I just want to add my voice to the chorus calling for some of the subway entrances to be opened. It'll have a bunch of benefits for the neighborhood. One is obviously just safety with ridership expanding dramatically. It's going to be a bottleneck with only one exit at a lot of these stations. Secondly, I think it will help revitalize the neighborhood. I live next to a closed Halsey Street stop. The closest gate stop is also closed. You have this big gap in between, and for an area with expensive real estate, it's surprising that there's all these vacant lots. It's also a matter of convenience. Long term, all of us would like to see all of these entrances have elevator access. But short term, there's got to be a compromise between a full renovation and this is basically changing a door. Just like to add two quick suggestions for improving service after the, improving getting anywhere after the L train closes down. The first one is just to make it more bike friendly. At the moment, it looks like Broadway is getting shelled by mortars. There's massive potholes and uneven pavement. I assume the MTA is in charge of that because the DOT fixes roads around. Then the last one is just simple. The J or the Z, one could go uptown. It will relieve a little bit of pressure on the M train, which will be the only train going uptown from that area. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Our final speaker, Iman Ramawi. What's your name? H-A-N-Z. You're not on the list. Is Iman Ramawi there?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, good. Why don't you go ahead and we'll deal with you in a moment, if you don't mind. Not right now. Iman Ramawi.
Okie dokie. My name's Iman Ramawi. I am the Accessoride Organizer and Coordinator at the New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. I have a t-shirt if you want one. Mr. Byford, I can tell you from my own experience, Accessoride is hugely subpar, and that's a kind description, actually. In addition to having to make reservations in advance, we have to suffer excruciatingly long rides, going from one borough to the next, only to arrive, often late, in our desired borough. Sometimes we are not even picked up at all. Sometimes we're dropped off in the middle of the block where there are no curb cuts, and I can go on and on and on and on, as we do in every meeting every month. We refuse to just sit back and take it. People with disabilities have lives, and we're entitled to transportation to support our lives. Whether I want to go hang out with my siblings, go to dinner with my boyfriend, get to work on time, what a concept, because I'd be fired if I worked anywhere else, leave late, go to the doctor's appointment, or just go shopping like everyone else. I can and I will. When ARG started, we highlighted 5 key areas where Accessoride needed to improve. Here they are. Application procedures are onerous, with many people with disabilities being rejected unfairly. Rides must be reserved a day or two in advance before they are needed, making last-minute trips for work or pleasure impossible. Pickups are often late or non-existent, leaving riders stranded or late for appointments and everything else. Rides take hours with multiple pickups and circuitous routes from borough to borough, leaving riders unable to make plans or keep plans or accept employment that involves travel or late hours. Riders' complaints go ignored and rejected, with the MTA acting as a judge and jury. And I just want to add, I've read a ton of articles about you, and you tried out the buses and the trains, And I would suggest for you to use Access-a-Ride with us, because I use it every single day. And there's no reason that I should be constantly late or take 5 or 6 hour tours around the city when I pay for Access-a-Ride. It's not free. And so I would suggest for you to take a ride with us and see how it feels, because nobody knows how it is until they actually ride it with us. And this is insane that we're treated like 3rd or 4th class citizens. Been in New York my entire life, and this is crap, and I hate paying for crap. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Ramawi. Okay, Mr. Hans. Robert Hans.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Robert Hans. I am a retired MTA bus AGM. It's AGM of Depot and AGM of Road Operations. But I would like to speak to certain members, to all the members of the board, especially those who were in the military and would remember at least as far back as I am a military, as I am a Vietnam veteran, 2-time Vietnam veteran. I would like to say that when I came home in 1969, we were called, unlike veterans of today, many things, amongst them, maybe the worst, we were called baby killers back then. Total and complete disrespect. Unlike, as I said before, what it is like today to be a military veteran, to be saluted, or to have acknowledged your service. I ask that the members of the board, those of you that know, those of you that have people, your sons, your daughters, anyone in the military, to please look down deep inside your hearts and in your conscience and say, how can we not take care of the military veterans? It seems to me that the MTA is the only organization in the country that totally ignores us. And I only mention Vietnam only because I speak for speaking for all military veterans of all branches of service everywhere. I, for one, am feeling like, as far as the MTA is concerned, that we are being disrespected the same way I was back in the late 60s when I came home. So I just ask you to please do the right thing. Look deep inside in yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hans. That concludes the public comment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'd like to begin the meeting by introducing the newest member of the executive leadership team. Last week, we were all happy to welcome Andy Byford as the new president of New York City Transit. Andy joins us after a widely hailed 5-year stint as CEO of the Toronto Transit Commission, which is the 3rd largest transit system in North America. While there, he helped reduce subway delays, and customer satisfaction hit record levels under his leadership. We're looking forward to it here as well. He advanced a major number of projects, including the phased introduction of a modern signal system, the rollout of a smart card, and the completion of a major subway line extension. These improvements led to TTC, the Toronto Transit Commission, being named last year's Outstanding Transit System of the Year by the American Public Transit Association. Andy is from the United Kingdom. He began his career in London at the London Underground, where over 14 years he rose to the position of general manager of the Central, Bakerloo, and Victoria lines. He oversaw increases in customer satisfaction and operational performance at the mainline UK railway system, and also became the chief operating officer of Australia's largest transit system in Sydney. At New York City Transit, Andy will lead the immediate and long-term modernization of one of the oldest and largest transit systems in the world, including ensuring the success of the Subway Action Plan, as you all know, which is aiming to stabilize and then modernize the subway system by targeting the current key drivers of delays. So Andy, welcome to the MTA family. Welcome to your first board meeting. We're thrilled that you're with us, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you. Very quickly, I'd like to give an update on the Subway Action Plan and a comparison between June of 2017, when we began implementing the plan, and December of 2017. The major incidents went from 81 to 50. It's a 38% improvement. Major signal incidents went from 25 to 23, an 8% improvement. Major track incidents went from 19 to 7, a 63% improvement. And if you exclude the day of the terrorist attack on December 10th, additional platform time went down 12%. Before I wrap up, I want to reiterate what I said last month about the Subway Action Plan. All of these improvements are the result of work being done by the transit workers, and I can't appreciate enough the amount that they're doing by working with management. They're working day and night under the plan to install miles of new track and repair thousands of right-of-way and station defects. Thank you very much. Before we go in, any comments before we move? Yes, Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to our new president. I want to address the issue of the pension. I've heard at my time at the board, I hear public comment about a lot of problems that seem to be almost intractable and difficult to solve. It's frustrating to sit here and listen to people who ride Access-a-Ride month in and month out complain about their problems, and we still haven't been able to come back with any kind of real program that addresses those programs. They're huge programs, huge problems, will take some time to resolve. And I'm very much interested in working on the resolution to those problems. But some problems aren't intractable. Some problems are easy to fix. They just require us to marshal the resources, understand the issues, and make a decision, period. Just make a decision. And what I'm hearing is that we have a group of employees who, through no fault of their own, are being treated differently than other groups of employees. And as they enter their golden years and should be retiring, and by the way, to a much deserved retirement, they can't make plans, and the plans that they do make are economically less advantageous to them than to coworkers that they supervise. We can answer this group of people by the next board meeting if we want to, and we should. I would suggest that a small group of us be impaneled to meet with HR, and I'd like to meet with the lawyers. They're advising the MTA on this matter, and I'd like to understand this issue, and I'd like to understand what it would cost to fix this problem. And I think that since it's not a difficult problem to solve, we should simply solve it. So that at the next meeting, we don't have to listen to 8 or 10 people that have a problem that could have otherwise been solved. I think it would be simple for us to give them a yes or a no answer, to be definitive about it by next board meeting. So I want to volunteer my services to help move this along in any way possible. But I think it's entirely possible to marshal the resources and just simply give a yes or a no answer.
We got a new working group. Right. So, Peter, I hear you loud and clear on the two particular issues. Regarding the labor issue, as you know, I've been setting up working groups with board members and management on very specific issues and problems. I will convene a working group. I'll ask Ronnie Hakem from the executive side to head it. If you're willing to be a member of that group and be the head of the group, actually, from the board's point of view, and any other board member who wants to be part of this working group, to look into this particular issue with the bus with the folks from MTA Bus. Overall. On the second issue we've got, which is paratransit, I understand and I sympathize with the riders who use paratransit. With that, we put together a working group headed by Pat Foy. Veronica Vanderpool is unfortunately not here today due to a death in her family. Have been very active together and working with the advocates and putting on new programs to make things change. And there have been some. I'm expecting a report, at which time we'll also report back to the full board on that issue. That being said, any other comments, questions? Obviously, the first item of business is the approval of the minutes from last December's meeting, which have been distributed to all the members. Seconded. All in favor? Any changes, comments? Aye. Thank you. Now the Committee on Finance. Mr. Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Committee met this month and reports on the following. There is one action item for board approval. The action item requests board approval to procure additional insurance coverage related to MTA's 2015 to 2019 capital plan, owner-controlled insurance program to include the Long Island Railroad expansion project for a total of $84.5 million. The committee recommends this action item, and I move it.
Yes. Do we have a second? Second. Any questions, comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
There is one non-competitive procurement for $16.8 million. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
I'll second it. Are there any questions or comments? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
There are 17 competitive procurements in the amount of $21.3 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
I'll second that. Are there any questions or comments? There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? They carry.
There are 9 ratifications in the amount of $23 million. The committee recommends these ratifications, and I move them.
I'll second them. Are there any questions or comments? There being none, all in favor
Mr.
say
Chairman,
aye.
I had voted
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
I had voted in committee against 2 of these items on the grounds that I didn't think that they were appropriately covered by the executive order, and so I vote no on those 2, which I...
Okay, duly noted.
The minutes of the Finance Committee, I think, reflect the 2 I voted against.
Right, understood. That was a comment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? Okay, will be noted in the record. Motion carries.
There are 3 real estate action items this month described on pages 73 through 78 of the board book distributed for this meeting. The committee recommends these real estate items, and I move them.
I'll second them. Any questions or comments?
Chairman,
Yes,
as
Mr.
I
Bell.
did at the committee meeting, I will recuse myself from the 3rd item. Thank
Okay,
you.
so noted.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments before we have our vote? Yes, Mr. Murdler.
Mr. Chairman, belatedly, I'd like the record to reflect my recusal on the item that appears at page 51 of the book, the Willis item.
So noted, and if Secretary of the Board needs any further information, they could check with Mr. Murdler after the meeting to make sure it's properly recorded. And I know it was in the committee meetings as well. Understood. We second the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Schwartz.
Mr. Chairman, this concludes the Finance Committee report.
Thanks. Now off to the report of the New York City Transit Committee. Commissioner Ferrer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Transit and Bus Committee met on Monday and reports the following. There is one action item for approval. The action item requests the board approve tariff changes to allow 1, bus operators to issue up to 2 paper transfers in response to planned or unplanned service diversions, and 2, allow subway station staff to issue up to 2 general order transfers during planned general order service disruptions. The committee recommends this action item, and I move it.
And I'll second it. Thank you. Any questions or comments? There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It carries.
There are 16 procurement items in a total amount of $1.7 billion. The committee recommended moving all the procurements to the board for a vote. But before proceeding further and to allow President Byford the opportunity to review these, I've moved to table the 3 enhanced station initiative contracts until the February meeting.
I second that motion. Do we have any questions or comments on the motion to table the 3 enhanced station initiative contracts? Yes, Commissioner.
I do. Well, I'm glad you all are tabling it, and I'm glad that President Byford will have a chance to review. And just as I promised at the Monday committee meeting, I have Darlene has emailed to all of you. I also have paper copies, and I particularly hope Mr. Byford will get a chance to review it just a quick analysis of the famous chart that I got from the MTA, which shows in different colored bubbles the stations with the highest overcrowding, and I think arguably the stations that have the most urgent need for rehabilitation. And there's a list attached, which is sort of, I guess we'd call it the city, what we think would be potentially some better priority stations. Perhaps we could even have a dialogue about that. Would very much like to. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Weisbrot.
I am also very pleased that these items are being tabled, and thank you, Mr. Byford, for suggesting that. I had raised a number of questions about these items, and not simply the stations themselves, but the enhanced station initiative generally, and the priority of the of this initiative, given other things that are so urgent to improve the subways, A, and B, the fact that this initiative is proceeding in a manner that is totally uncoordinated with the disability access needs of the stations, and we've heard a lot about that from many people who have testified today and on Monday and before. And I hope, Mr. Byford, as you review this for February, you will take both of those major considerations into account as well. And just underscore what Commissioner Trottenberg said, which is, I think, especially given the back and forth between the city and MTA management over the last few days, I think what should be clear from the city's perspective is that how important it is from the city's perspective that the city be consulted on these initiatives, and that the earlier coordination between the MTA and the city can take place, and a dialogue can take place between the two, both on an operational and policy level and a funding level. I would say the more productive and constructive we could all be. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Saul.
Actually, I'm disappointed that we're not moving forward at this meeting with the station enhancement contracts, because I think this is one of the most serious problems that we have here. These stations are in terrible condition. All one has to do is go down and look at some of the stations. They're really an embarrassment to the riding public, and I think that, and frankly, instead of spending the money on some of these huge capital projects, and again, I go back to bringing the Long Island Railroad into Grand Central Station and even the 2nd Avenue subway, I think the priority for this board should be to maintain and bring what our existing equipment and stations up to what we would consider to be a state of good repair. And I think that when we look at our capital plan, frankly, we should go back now and take a look again and be sure that we're really analyzing where we're spending our money. And I think station enhancements, absolutely one of the most important things. Having said that, I don't understand the Judlow contract, and I had just a brief discussion with a few people this morning, but that's the same contractor that we pulled a major contract from just recently. There was a lot of question about how the performance has been in the past, and I think that before we go into another contract with this person, I think the board should understand why we feel, after pulling a contract, that now it's appropriate to give this contract to this contractor. So I think now that we've pulled it, I would like to get an explanation, and I did get a very rushed explanation, but I'd really like to understand why now we're deciding to go forward with another major contract with Judlow. So I really think that the board, we really need to spend some time again on the capital plan in light of what's been going on here at the MTA, and make sure that our priorities are really correct. And a lot of these big new initiatives, it all sounds great, but I got to tell you, I think we have to make sure that what we're operating here works and is up to snuff.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Albert.
One of the benefits that came out of Monday's discussion and the now tabling of the Enhanced Station Initiative is perhaps the board can get the criteria by which these stations were selected, because to Commissioner Saul's comment, the 200 and some odd, or I'm sorry, the 33 stations that are in the total package are far from the stations that are in most need of work in the system. So I think it would behoove the board to get the reasoning behind the selection of these stations, and I look forward to getting that information. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ward.
Mr. Chairman, in the brief period of time I've been here, it seemed an unusual event that this board would turn down the recommendation of a particular contractor, which is what we did with this contractor, Judlow.
Judlow.
I was glad to see that happen. I think that it's the kind of things that the board should focus on. And I'm disappointed that they're being recommended for new work without the board being thoroughly briefed on exactly what the rehabilitative process was and why they meet the hurdles necessary to be reconsidered by the board in the future. It seems that it's such an unusual act for us to turn somebody down in the way that we did, that I would, unless I missed something in a previous meeting, I'd like to know a little bit more about what the rehabilitative process was for this contractor before they get considered and before they're put back in front of the board. I think we're all entitled to a little bit more deference from staff who make these recommendations. Like I said, that was just such an unusual act in the brief period of time I've been here that I found it unusual they were being reconsidered.
Commissioner, it was discussed at the Transit Committee meeting. I'll make sure that you are also briefed, and any other member who would like to be briefed on Judlow. And ever since the action had been we took this action at the board level, what has changed in that organization and the advancement that's gone on at that organization for the station down here that was destroyed on 9/11. So with that, I'll make sure that someone on the staff.
Who's the appropriate person who'll brief me?
Sorry? Steve. Yeah, Steve Platok. Steve P.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I say this?
Yes,
just
Commissioner
because I did get a briefing, and just so, because I saw the same thing, and in the briefing, it feels, to me at least, that the staff has done a very good job of raising the bar and setting new expectations and new controls with Judlow. So I think that the benefit of us raising it and pushing back the last time was there was a new standard set in approaching this. I think when you speak to Steve, you'll feel comfortable based on that.
Yeah, if I could just phrase it, message was received, message was heard, and they've moved at a speed that was beyond what we had thought they could be capable of doing. So.
And let's not forget, they also have the Canarsie tube job.
Right. And also remember that, you know, the thing that concerned me about what was going on at Cortlandt Street is this was the same organization that was at the Montague Street Tunnel that they were in charge of. They came in under budget and sooner than expected. So, you know, the experience that we had at Cortlandt, if the message did not get across to them the way it did, I don't think we'd be in the position that we're in on the recommendation. But I will clearly make Steve available to you and any other member of the board to understand everything that went on in that. Yes, Commissioner Saul.
Joe, the thing that really baffles me is we give out all this work, tremendous amounts of work here with state money, hard-working people's money. Here we have some of these contractors that we keep going back to the same ones, and I understand the problems of getting new people here to bid on these jobs, but oh my God, in the state of New York, in this country, the United States, there's got to be more contractors that are qualified to do this work so we don't wind up. Why do we have to go back to somebody that hasn't performed properly for us in the past, that we had all kinds of problems with, that we turned down on a contract? There's got to be a better way here. I know we're working on this thing, but this is a $125 million contract, some major stations here that you know, have real ramifications for the ridership. And here we go, we're giving it to somebody that at best, yes, maybe they promised they're going to do a better job, but why do we need to go back to somebody like
Well,
this again?
Andrew, I agree we need more competition. We need more people responding to our RFPs and all of that. And but I will also, and I totally agree, we put together a working group to be able to find ways to enhance our competitive nature and getting more coming in. I will tell you, though, that the Judd Law, the performance is not based on a verbal assurance. It's been based on the actual work that they've been doing since they were denied another contract. So it's more than just verbal. It's actual reality. Commissioner Merdler?
Mr. Chairman, there is a fact that some of you may not either understand or have been told so far, and that is that as a result of events over the past months in terms of compliance with contract demands, in terms of significant adverse incident reports on various contractors and vendors, there has been, particularly within the Long Island Railroad and in, most importantly, New York City Transit, an increased use of integrity monitors being part of a contract to make sure that there is compliance in the full sense of that term, and that the chairman and Steve Plachucki in particular have been paying a very close eye and attention to making sure that integrity monitors are in place and will continue to be in place to ensure performance going forward. And I thank you.
Commissioner Greenberg?
On the Enhanced Station Initiative itself, I understand that every 5 years we do a station condition survey, structural and architectural. I think last year was one of those surveys. I don't know if it's completed yet, but I think it would be helpful if when we see the contract for these stations, or even a list of all the stations that have been selected, where they fit in that condition survey, and that would explain why they were selected, because most of us here, you know, we use the system. You walk into some of these stations, they say, well, I don't see anything wrong with it. So maybe there's some structural things or some other elements behind it we don't see that need to be addressed in the list of stations. So I think that would be helpful to see how we came up with this list of stations. As far as accessibility, I do think we do have to work a little harder about regarding accessibility and not necessarily elevators. I've talked to some people who suggested switchback ramps, which we use. I know we use in one place, which is 42nd Street, but that's a thing we all have to think about, whether that would be, we need a lot of space to do that, to actually put in ramps rather than an elevator.
The zigzags.
Yeah, Commissioner Calise actually, I came up with myself, but Commissioner Calise actually mentioned it too, but I don't think we want to do it for several flights.
Right, no, I understand. Okay.
But I think looking at some of these stations, maybe that might be some way to
Are there any further questions or comments? Because we have a motion on the table to table. It's been seconded. Are there any further comments? All those in favor of tabling?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None opposed? The items are tabled. Mr. Ferrer.
Mr. Chairman, lest we get lost in the weeds, there are remaining procurement items that were approved in committee, and I move their approval at the board.
I'll second them. Any questions or comments? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
And there are 13 remaining competitive procurements for a total of $1.5 billion for New York City Transit. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
And I will second that. Are there any questions or comments before we vote? There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
And that concludes the Transit and Bus Committee report.
Thank you, Commissioner Ferrer. Next, Dr. Metzger, the report for the Metro North Committee.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
Yes, it's still morning. The Metro North Railroad Committee met on Monday, and I report the following. There are 2 ratifications this month in the total amount of $472,000. The committee recommends these ratifications, and I move them.
I'll second them. Are there any questions or comments? There being none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. There are no non-competitive procurements and no competitive procurements. And this concludes the Metro North Railroad Committee.
Thank you, Dr. Metzger. Next is Commissioner Mitch Pally, who will deliver the report from the Long Island Railroad Committee.
Good morning. The Long Island Railroad Committee met this Monday, and I report the following. There is one non-competitive procurement for the Long Island Railroad in the amount of $18.3 million. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
I'll second it. Any questions or comments? There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
There are 30 competitive procurements, one for Long Island Railroad in the amount of $80.35 million, and 29 for MTA Capital Construction in the amount of $61 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
I'll second them. Are there any questions or comments? There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's carry.
There are 3 ratifications, 2 for the Long Island Railroad in the amount of $4.8 million, and 1 for MTA Capital Construction in the amount of $2.8 million. The committee recommends these ratifications, and I move them.
I'll second that. Any questions or comments? There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ratification's carried.
And this concludes the report of the Long Island Railroad Committee.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Comment on this committee before we move on? Mr. Chairman, is that okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, sir. So I
On
just
the
want,
Long Island Railroad
on Long
Committee
Island
or the
Railroad,
Bridges?
yeah.
Okay.
So I was reflecting on my, on the committee meeting and some of the comments that we had and interaction that Pat and I had relative to the challenges that the Long Island Railroad has had recently. And, as I reflect on it, I just find the responses to be inadequate based on the challenges. And, there's 2 pieces. One is obviously the service challenges and whether or not we need some form of Long Island Railroad action plan similar to you've instituted with the subway action plan to figure out how we're going to get things functioning, and maybe changing some protocols in terms of when equipment goes out and doesn't go out as it relates to weather, et cetera. But it's just the level of service is totally unacceptable. But I think, more than that, because some of these things aren't controllable. You can't control Amtrak sometimes, you can't control equipment failure, but what you can control is communication. And in the discourse that Pat and I were having, one of the comments I think he used was that there's no centralized control center for the communication, and that frankly that's not going to be in place, best case, into 2021 or 22, something like that. And I just think that we can't blame this on the fact that we don't have a control center in in the 21st century. We have to think about how do we use other approaches to communicate better amongst our own internal people so we communicate better to our customer. And I think that's a standard that that needs to be set. And we just we're already a capital starved agency, and money's not going to solve all of our problems. And so sometimes we need to use common sense, good management skills, and good processes. And I feel like there's been just a leadership failure here and a management failure, and our customers are suffering for it. And so I ask that you give some focus on that. And I spoke to Pat earlier today as well about refocusing and thinking about what are the processes that we use to communicate internally and plans that we can better communicate with our customers.
Commissioner, I agree with your comments, and in fact have been public about it and talking to the press about it. That being said, I've been working closely with Pat as well as Ronnie about developing an approach. Whether it's called a Long Island Action Plan or not will remain to be seen. What it's called doesn't matter, but urgency is important, communication is important, and working with Pat, we've had some changes on the equipment side and on the engineering side, which I think is going to be very important. But there's no doubt, as I've said publicly, I'm not satisfied with the performance. Yes, there are issues like Amtrak, but holding those things that we can control, we need to control, and we need to do a better job. So I will work with Pat. I will work with Ronnie. We will come back. I want to be satisfied with the performance of the Long Island Railroad. So thank you. Any other questions or comments before we move on to bridges and tunnels? Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Commissioner Brown.
Without in any way belittling the very real, process and leadership and resource issues that the subway is dealing with for their action plan, and now Long Island wants an action plan too. I'd just like to point out that Metro North is not asking you for an action plan of any sort, and and I just don't want that to mean that all the resources are going to go. In the machine trade, we got a saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Right.
And I just don't want presently it seems like all the capital resources, it seems like are flowing in other locations, and Metro North's plodding along with an undramatic good service. And it's not like Metro North doesn't have any problems. It's like, however, you cross a certain line of problems, and then all of a sudden the system shifts to give more resources to where the problems are. And maybe you should, spread the grease around a little bit here.
So, Commissioner, the reason why I hesitate in calling something a Long Island action plan, because it'll be different from the subway action plan because of exactly what you're saying. We need to look at all of our operating entities and make sure they run as efficiently as possible, with the exception of the Unified Control Center, which was just spoken about that we don't have but need, especially for communications at the Long Island Railroad. The Long Island Railroad issues are less to deal with, a money-related issue. It is a management issue, and we will address that issue and make it happen. And I applaud the folks at Metro North for doing what they do every day, day in and day out, hourly, back and forth. There are days when they also have issues, but I will keep my eye on their performance as I do in the morning rush hour, in the evening rush hour, and the following morning to make sure that everything was consistent in both of the commuter railroads. So I'm keeping my eye on all of that, and just make sure. Commissioner Zuckerman.
Mr. Brown, thank you for opening the floodgates a drop there. I have mentioned it various times in the capital plan that those of us who live in the Metro North territory accept and are okay with the fact that in the last capital plan, the biggest thing we did in Metro North, at least in the existing territory, was improve the Croton Harmon yards. I would say, and I said this in the safety committee meeting, and I hate to repeat things, but I think it's important, we have 341 days until the end of the year. The number one thing that this administration, this organization must do related to Metro North, in this man's humble opinion, is implement PTC by the end of the year. We have agreed to do that, we have mandated to do that, and we must do that. I agree with Norman that we all should be vigilant. I know myself, Jamie, Sue are constantly, Andrew for that matter as well, are all constantly evaluating the stations within our territories. We've submitted at various times to management the conditions of those stations. Our wish lists have been shared, things including electrification of the Hudson all the way up to Poughkeepsie being one of my pet ideas. But for right now, in the year 2018, the number one thing I cared about, representing those in my community, is PTC's implementation on time. So I expect that as Long Island Railroad maybe improves its on time. Yeah, well, and you gotta ensure that my ride in the summer from the Merrick station is okay. But besides that parochial point, I do think that each area runs for what its needs are. Your predecessor, Joe, had talked often about this is one system. I do believe that's one system, and at times we need to fix the parts of the system that need help, and the other parts of the system can wait till it's maybe more need. The need we have in Metro North is for PTC to be implemented.
Agreed, and as I mentioned at the safety committee meeting, and you spoke about the need for putting together a dashboard and to talk about the layering that goes on, that PTC is an on-off switch. It's a layer of various different things. How many things we have already done, and put that out for the public so that everybody's aware of both the process and what's actually happened. I, too, agree with my predecessor. I'd like this to be one MTA. It kind of reminds me of my family when they get together at Thanksgiving. They may be one family, but boy, they have their own particular issues. So with that, yes, Commissioner?
Just very briefly, I think the Long Island Railroad has unique challenges that most commuter railroads don't have, and that's converging lines. It's the bottleneck of Jamaica. It's the bottleneck that is Penn Station, and it's that everyone well, not everyone, but that Penn Station is a major terminal, and it's run by somebody else. And we don't even know from firsthand the condition of the tracks we use to get into Penn Station. And I asked at the Long Island committee meeting that maybe we should consider hiring outside consultant, have our own people examine the conditions of those tunnels. I don't know if we should rely on Amtrak anymore to do that. That's one thing. On the other side of that, because Amtrak's the East River tunnels are causing us so much delays, and we don't have control over them. I feel that we need to make a lot of efforts in other areas to create a better reliability on the railroad. In other words, there's a certain amount of failure that could be tolerated. On Long Island Railroad, it's going to have to be less. In other words, the MDBF has to be higher, the signal breakdowns have to be less, because we're faced with the issue of Penn Station, the bottlenecks. Because whenever something happens, it's not just one train or two or three, it's 10, 15 trains. So we're really at tight capacity. Means any any small, it's much like the subway. Any small delay cascades, and that's why we need a much higher level of reliability than we'd otherwise need. And that's going to I think it's going to cost us some money, but I don't know what choice we have.
I will, the track review, I'll look into that and take that under advisement. And one area that you might have touched on, but the one thing that I always focus on is that the single point of failure within the Long Island Railroad is the fact that the only way to get into Penn Station is to go through an East River Tunnel, again, also not ours, it's right by Amtrak. And while we are getting more involved in that process and have helped them, it's helped them in some ways, it still is, from a structural point of view, a very difficult issue. And we are working with Amtrak to enhance relations overall and to try to get them, to both sides, to work together better. Okay. Commissioner Merdler, the Bridge and Tunnel Report.
Mr. Chairman, the Bridges and Tunnels Committee met on Monday, and I report the following. For all of the following actions, the committee voted in favor to recommend the procurements. However, a quorum was not present for the vote. There is one competitive procurement this month in the total of $1.7 million. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
I'll second that. Any questions or comments? There being none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries.
There are 3 ratifications in the total amount of $24.5 million. The committee recommends these ratifications, and I move them.
I'll second that. Are there any questions or comments? There being none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
There are no non-competitive procurements. Okay. This concludes the Bridges and Tunnels Committee report.
Thank you, Commissioner Merdler. At this time, and actually I'm going to call for executive session to discuss matters regarding collective bargaining, but for the members as well as the public. Excuse me? We had nothing before MTACC. Sorry, there were no issues before capital construction. Our next board meeting in February is actually a little bit off the normal schedule. It's the week of President's Day, so the committee meetings are on a Tuesday, not a Monday, after that, and that the board meeting is on a Thursday. It's been on the calendar, but I want to just make sure, highlight it for members of the committee as well as the public, that the normal committee days are a little bit out of sync as they've been put together. So now, may I have a motion to convene an executive session to discuss a matter or matters regarding collective bargaining pursuant to Section 105(1)(e) of the New York State Public Offices Law. Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye. We'll be in executive session now, and we will come back to into public session immediately after the actions. The board approved 5 action items, including a pension matter and 4 labor contracts. Can I have your attention, please? Excuse me. The board's still in session. The board approved 5 actions, including a pension matter and 4 labor contracts, consistent with previous bargaining patterns. As you may be aware, we did not have an audit committee meeting on Monday. The audit committee meeting will be in February. And now may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? A second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. See you next month. Thank you. Yeah. So before I start, I just want to make 2 announcements regarding, on this side we have a notification about a Power Transit app forum. As part of an outreach program, there will be a Power Transit mobile app forum held right in this room on March 1st from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. The purpose of this is, as I mentioned earlier, we're in the process of building a new app that will help our customers navigate throughout the system. Darrell Irick mentioned during the committee meeting that we're also developing a fully integrated app for our paratransit customers that will enable them to call for a ride, track where their car is and where their ride is going, and give us a real-time feedback on their experience. That's all going. This forum is being done in conjunction with many of the advocates and many of the elected officials, and so this is all part and parcel of what I want to see changed on the paratransit side. Regarding the L train or the Canarsie line and the shutdown that's about to happen, tonight will be the first of several open houses that are jointly held by New York City DOT as well as the MTA. The goal is to provide information to the public and the community regarding the plan that will help mitigate the impact of the repairs on the Canarsie Tunnel and on the L line. Tonight's open house is going to be held in East Williamsburg. Thank you. It works? Thank you. Okay. So for the reporters who are here in the front, anything you can do to help make the public aware of what we're doing, especially about the forum tonight, I think it would be very, very important for the people who live along there. With that?
We don't have a portable microphone this time, so we'll just go right down the line. And then we'll get you in the back. We'll get you in the back, I promise.
So I had a question. I'm here for Alfonso today. I had one question. I know you talked to him yesterday about leadership or management shakeup at the LIRR. Can you elaborate? You touched on it a little bit today about what that might be. And then just a follow-up from me, what do you plan to get out of the tabling of the ESI station contracts today? Are you going to look at choosing different stations or different, like what exactly do you plan on hashing out there?
Regarding the Long Island Railroad, I'm working with Ronnie Hakem as well as Pat Novakowski. There have been some managerial changes that have actually happened in the engineering side, as I mentioned at the board meeting. We're putting together a plan, which, as you know from the board meeting, I'm not going to necessarily give the plan a name, but what I really want, and if you recall, at the end of this past summer, the performance of the Long Island Railroad was actually talked about and praised by both the riders and the press about what they achieved during what was going to be the summer of hell. In that particular case, they performed extraordinarily well. I said I wanted that to be the new normal. I said it was going to be the new normal. Obviously, it's next time we'll go to NBC to have do this, and we'll do it in the newsroom. It'll be a lot easier. They got better coffee. In any event, you know, the overall approach to get back to a sense of better communication, explanations of the delays. I don't want to, you know, think just it snows in New York. It's not a recent phenomenon. At all. So it's not a reason for having the types of delays in the actions that happened. That's the answer to the first question. Second question on what do I expect to happen. I think Andy Byford will review the process that went on. Let me review for you my point of view of what's happened here, some of which happened before I came back. We have included in the current capital budget $2.5 billion for stations, mostly station enhancements. Don't call it ESI. That's $2.5 billion that overall were in stations. The stations that we wanted to make changes to, all of which these are some of them, were all included in the capital plan. During that period of time, we also went through creating new station design guidelines to make the experience of our customers different. And so one of the things, the thought process was, we wanted to look at stations, in this initial stations, the first phase of this. You know, remember what I said, the total program is $2.5 billion. Today's contracts were two, one for $125 million, another for $85 million. So you got a large program. These are two small ones. And the reason why they're small and the reason why they're targeted to these stations is not because they're targeted because we have to shut down a station to do what we need to do here for 6 months. We also want to make sure that the new guidelines as we develop them work and actually work. There's a different approach for how people enter the station, both upstairs and downstairs, and we also wanted to make sure that contractors can do it at the level and that we wanted to. So we said we were going to take those stations that we could shut down for 6 months quickly, see how it worked, and then be able to roll it out all the way, throughout the system and the spending of the $2.5 billion. Look, the whole point of this program is to make the experience for our customers better. We chose ones that, as was mentioned, there are bullet points. There's those with the most need, those with the most number of passengers. When you do a pilot, using the ones with the most amount of need to see if we can get it done, or a pilot and using a pilot to look at the largest stations possible so it impacts the most number of people, is not the right way to do a pilot. A pilot is to look at it small, and get it done. I'll have an open dialogue with the city members on this issue and fully understand, all of the things that are going to get done with the $2.5 billion. That's in the total amount of that's included. $16.7 billion all told for New York City Transit, and the $2.5 billion for stations. I'll have an open dialogue.
I wanted to ask, following up from the story on something in ComEd and the power delay numbers, did anyone in the governor's office outside the press shop personally contact you in the lead up to the governor's Avenue breakfast where he made mention of the 32,000 power delays?
No one reached out to me, including anybody from the governor's press office.
And does that include, did anyone in MTA or New York City Transit staff come to you and tell you that there were anyone from the governor's office had contacted them regarding this power issue?
No, they didn't, but I understood what the issue was. There was going to be a press conference that talked about service delivery, service disruptions, and delays, or delays and service disruptions, whatever way you want to look at it, but all in total. As the New York Times article that came out right around that August 10th or thereabouts highlighted, very much so, that this is outside the Subway Action Plan. We collect data in the Subway Action Plan not based on power. We base it on what's happened, what's going on with signals, what's going on with track, what's going on with switches, what's going on platforms, all of the various different things that we have in the Subway Action Plan, all of which have some power-related issues. The specific request was that we needed to take everything and do all power-related issues that have anything to do with a delay and/or a service disruption, not and/or, and a service disruption. And so it included items in there which, your article wondered why. I mean, elevators that didn't work because of the power surge, shutting down of the system because at a station five stations away, there was an unauthorized person on the track, and the NYPD or the FDNY shut down the power. That's a power-related service disruption. And it's as simple
to follow up.
When I'm done, you can ask again. But so in the process, that's what's going on. This was all going on while I was actively beginning the very early days of the Subway Action Plan. Very different. Remember, we disclosed the Subway Action Plan, I can't remember the exact date, but we're in the throes of it at this point in early August. The focus on power-related issues had nothing to do with root cause, like your article said, or anything like that. And the folks who collect the data here were collecting the data because I wanted to be very, very careful on the veracity of the Subway Action Plan. This issue of trying to just look at power only, or actually electricity only and then power once it hits any part of our system, was outside the scope of the Subway Action Plan collection. But what they were asked to do was to look at each one of the buckets and put them in a place where any time that there was anything electrical or power related.
Right. Okay. So we're in agreement on that then. So just to sum it up.
I'm not sure what we agree on, but okay.
That anything involved with electricity that malfunctioned and caused a subway delay was included in this figure. So I want to ask
plus service disruptions. Service disruptions are significantly more than the delays. When you have a service disruption regarding a Metro card machine, the electricity has a problem and passengers can't get a new Metro card or add more funds to the new Metro card. Digital signage that goes out. There are, when you look at it, focusing solely on delays is probably an area where you and I don't agree. I'm dealing with service disruptions, which include lots of things.
For the facts, it was described as delays. That
No,
there
it
were
was not.
incidents.
No, it was not.
Delays,
If you go back,
there were incidents, and then there are delays. That's what the emails say.
No,
that there
that's
are
what the
counts as
emails say.
incidents, and then delays result from incidents. But my question is, what is the totality of your understanding of the governor's office's involvement in crafting this figure with the MTA and New York City Transit? What's your understanding of the level of involvement?
My understanding of the involvement is we needed to take our data to be able to provide all power-related issues that dealt with delays and service disruptions, as was included in the governor's press release. It was very specific about what it was.
But I'm specifically asking what is your understanding of the governor's office's, the people in the governor's office, or in the governor himself, their specific involvement with people who work at MTA or New York City Transit?
They knew the number. They knew the number that was given was only root cause of power issues, and we needed. And the request was, what are all power-related issues?
And the request from who?
The email in question came from a gentleman who would do PowerPoints. Maxwell, I can't remember his last name, but I remember reading in your newspaper the name on there, asking questions. Maxwell, I think Maxwell has now gone back to college or back to graduate school.
He's not in the governor's office.
Right, he's gone back to graduate school. He's a very young, enterprising young man who does better PowerPoints than I've ever seen in my life, including my days in investment banking. So I was very impressed with Maxwell's ability to do what he does. He was the one who was responsible for putting together the charts from PowerPoint to become charts for the governor. So he was doing what was asked of him, and that is to get power related. I don't know of any other involvement.
So that's it's just limited to Maxwell Morgan. I just want to be clear that
there was another name on there who I don't know who that is
Maria.
at all.
So the three press aides that were referenced in the story. That's you're saying the governor's office's involvement is limited to just Maxwell Morgan and the press aides we named in those emails.
It's the best. Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Andrew.
Gary, Joe, yesterday the city's MTA folks, along with Dean Fluhan, had a conference call about what they felt were problems with the governor's ask in terms of the city's MTA responsibility. And then I believe you and Pat did your own conference call in the afternoon, essentially rebutting that. What accounted for your later in the evening statement aimed at the mayor? Did you feel that you and Pat had not gotten your point across, or was there something directed at you to more sharply go after the mayor last night?
Desire to just to air it out. Look, I'm inclined to say the following. Not inclined to say the following. I will say the following. The proposals that are put on the table in an executive budget are exactly that, a proposal. It is the beginning of a dialogue. Doing dueling press conferences is not the way you negotiate legislation or budgets. So, you know, there was one side of a negotiating table is going to have, does a press, some kind of a telephone call, conference call. We did the same thing to address the issues. In response to what was said by Commissioner Trottenberg and Dean Foulihan and Corporation Counsel, we got numerous requests from you and your colleagues to answer questions, and instead of doing it individually, we too got into a call. You know, that's not the right way to do it. We need to have a dialogue. We need to talk about these things, and like all legislation, you know, someone once said, you know, watching legislation is like watching sausage being made. You know, we got to get back to the normal way in which things get done, which is sit across the table and talk.
But then why after your and Pat's response, hours later, did you say, by the way, the mayor doesn't care about funding the subway?
I guess it got to a point where I just felt necessary to get my point of view on. plan itself.
Danielle?
Hey, Chairman. I just want to follow up on the ESI issue. You said earlier that you're looking at pilot stations and you want to see the process and how well you can do these stations. So I'm just wondering about, in terms of accessibility, what plan does the MTA have to make sure that there is, a handicapped accessible network across the entire system that will allow people to get around, and how long do you think that'll take to happen?
Right. So part of the $2.5 billion for stations includes accessibility issues, elevators, escalators, and things like that. I don't have the exact breakout for you, and I can get it for you, what's in that $2.5 billion that is there for accessibility, both new elevators as well as repair of elevators that tend to break down frequently. So they're all incorporated as part of that. The initial pilot plan, look, well documented by the New York Times, this organization has had a history of things cost more than they should. So the process of doing this with these enhanced stations is, let's take some of the smallest stations, let's find out which contractors can do the job best, who can do it for the least amount of money, who can follow the directions that we gave them, as well as who can get it done faster. And in fact, some of the earlier ones out in Queens, out in Sunset Park, were done a little bit earlier than scheduled, so it's working. What is it that they did that we can then use with others as we roll the entire thing out? I mean, the whole point of doing it on a pilot basis was to get it done right on these other ones and then scale it out. $2.5 billion is a lot of money. And so the whole point of this was to do it in a reasonable basis. Again, all of the various different stations, those that we've done already, those were on the list today, those that are continued on the list for the remaining part of the $2.5 billion are the exact same list that was put out with the capital plan and when it was approved both by the board and the Capital Program Review Board.
So you're talking about a very long period of time. Can you tell the public, can you tell, your riders who need to use these services, how long is it going to take where they have a system that they can rely on to get around?
How long do they have a system for accessibility and all that stuff? Why don't let me get back to you. I'm looking around. Somebody has the charts for all that stuff. I don't have that with me to get to show you what the roadmap is for what those stations, where those stations are, and the work that's being done in preparation for what needs to be done on the street level, what needs to be done on the both the street level, both the actual sidewalk, in many cases, as well as in the on the street. You'll note, I would like to note that there were some people talking earlier this week. I was astounded a week ago when I found out that an elevator that is proposed, conjunction between the Transit Authority and the developer, on Broad Street opposite the New York, kind of diagonal from the New York Stock Exchange. The people who lived near there thought it was going to be a terrorist, a place in which it'll enhance terrorism. And it's the most absurd thing I'd ever heard. And I agree with all of the folks who came to the committee meeting on Monday about accessibility. The veracity of that's not there. There have been public meetings about that. So part of that is, and the only reason why I bring that up, is that when we do these elevators, we just can't do it without talking to the community. The community has a role and an involvement. The city has a role and an involvement. It's their street, whether it's the sidewalk or the street itself. And so we'll have to follow those rules. But in answer to your core question, I'll get back to you, and I'll make sure John gets you information about the timing.
I am here. Dana.
Hi.
Hey, Dana.
So when you were the first deputy mayor under Giuliani and the budget director, were you under the impression that the city, it was its responsibility to fully fund the capital plan for New York City Transit?
I knew what the law was at the time. I knew at the time that the law hadn't been changed at all, that said and reiterated in 1981 that the capital was there. The capital requirement was there. That was known. I mean, what different now than what's in the New York City budgets when I was both budget director and first deputy mayor. When you went to the back of the larger books, all of the transit workers were included in the number of city employees. It wasn't because they were counted as part of being city employees. They're part of NYSERS. They're subject to the civil service rules of the City of New York. And we knew that because we know that the City of New York back in the mid-'60s and the creation of the MTA, basically they own it and it's leased over for operating purposes to the MTA. And that lease has been updated a couple of times since then. The merger with the transit police from the from being in New York City Transit directly to the NYPD, so it would be outside of that scope. So in answer to your question, did I know it? Absolutely knew it.
So was the
I knew it when I
Giuliani
was an investment
administration?
banker. I also knew it when I was an investment banker for the MTA in the 80s, when in fact I was involved in making sure that the documents that went out were had full and complete disclosure. That's how I first became aware of it. As an investment banker, understanding the credit and the creditworthiness of the MTA, you had to understand what's there. And the first thing that jumps off the page when you look at it is that, the MTA owns the Long Island Railroad and it owns Metro North, but it's affiliated with the New York City Transit Authority, which when you read it begs the question for me in the part of due diligence, what exactly does that mean? And all of a sudden it unravels of what the requirements were.
So was the Giuliani administration violating the law by not fully funding New York City Transit's capital requirements?
They weren't violating the law, I wouldn't put it that way. At the time, whatever discussions there were with the MTA on its capital program, and this I'd have to go back and look at, there was some funding, and I think there were a period of time overlapped two capital programs. I'd have to go back and look and see what was put in. There was a period of time when the city did more than the state, and then the state did more than the city. It's gone back and forth over the 5-year plans.
Okay. I mean, if they weren't violating the law, then it doesn't seem like it really is the law that the city has to fully fund the New York City.
So the law, let me go back just to 1981, and reading Chapter 314 of the laws of the state of New York, item number 7, quote, although under existing laws, and by the way, this is when the MTA was given the power to issue debt. Prior to that, it did not have the power to issue debt on behalf of the New York City Transit Authority. In the process of doing that, then Chairman Dick Ravitch said, I need capital. I need the cars are in complete disrepair. They're old. They're painted. They're graffiti filled. I need the capital dollars. Therefore, I want the MTA to have the opportunity to issue debt. They went to Albany, got the legislation to issue debt, and Albany gave them the ability to issue debt, for which I was very happy as an investment banker on the other side, being able to work with them on that. That being said, when the MTA was given the opportunity to issue debt on behalf of the MTA, here's what the legislature said. Although under existing laws and pursuant to its lease with New York City Transit Authority, the City of New York is required to provide for the capital needs of New York City Transit Authority. The City of New York's fiscal needs have been and are of such a magnitude that it has not done so for some considerable period of time. This legislation, without relieving the city of its contractual and statutory obligations, permits New York City Transit Authority, by agreement with the Metropolitan Transportation Authority and with the assistance of TBTA, to meet the most urgent of these needs. So it's just a reiteration.
Right, but the master lease between the MTA and the city that was updated in 1982 says that the city shall not have to pay more than $5 million a year towards the capital plan without the mayor's approval.
Right.
And Dick Ravitch totally disagrees with
that.
Right,
I know Dick doesn't remember this, but the fact of the matter is, when the mayor at the time said, well, I'm only good for up to $5 million, or I have the right to veto it over, when the Capital Program Review Board was put together, that is why the mayor of New York, the Mayor Koch, and then all mayors subsequent to him have that power. They have the ability to veto the capital plan. The way the Capital Program Review Board works, it works under what I call the UN Security Council rules. It's not a majority that wins or anything like that. All members must agree to it, and if any one of them doesn't agree to it, the entire proposal goes down. This goes to the fact that the mayor of New York, as the Speaker of the Assembly and the Majority Leader of the Senate, also have the power to vote down any part of it. Now, the mayor of New York only has the ability to vote down the capital plan for New York City Transit, whereas the other two guys that I mentioned, other two titled people that I mentioned, have the ability to veto any and all of the capital plan.
Paul?
Hi. Could you just help clarify on the Enhanced Station Initiative? You've cited the $2.5 billion figure a few times. For the 33 stations that are under the ESI, is that $2.5 billion for those, or is it the roughly $1 billion figure that everybody else?
The ones for today were, one was for 125, I'm sorry, did I misunderstand?
Yeah, sorry, not today. I mean, in total, the 33 stations under the ESI?
Yeah, it's 1 million out of the
1 billion. 1 billion.
1 billion out of the 2.5 billion are for station enhancements.
Okay, so it's a $1 billion pilot program to...
No. That's a different question. The amount that's in the 2.5 billion, but yeah, fine, it's a pilot program. It takes off.
The ESI is a...
It then gets to ramp up. No, absolutely.
The ESI is a pilot program.
No, ESI is a program. To begin the program, we wanted to find those stations, all of which were included in the original plan, and the number of stations that we're going to have enhancements.
The 33.
To take some of them that we could. It's basically a pilot as an experiment. Will it work? Can we get it done for the amount of money we think it's going to cost? Can we get it done on time? And can we, in this pilot stage, minimize the disruption that it causes? The number of people who take the train that station. Now, every station has customers, but we're looking for the ones that we disclose. If I went to a very large station, it disrupts a lot, and I wanted to be able to start in a way, or before me as well, start in a way that it was done in a way in which we can get it done. I'll give you a perfect example, an analogy type example. 5 years ago, when we started doing, completely unrelated to the Transit Authority, but when we started doing cashless tolling, we wanted to do it as a pilot. So we took one of the smaller bridges, the Henry Hudson Bridge, and the point of it was, a really important point was not to see how it worked, but to also make sure that our back office was in such a way that we could be able to send bills to those folks who didn't have Easy Pass and find ways in which we can collect them. And in fact, because I knew then that if it worked, it was going to need to be rolled out. And when it gets rolled out, you've got much bigger bridges, and with the RFK / Triborough Bridge, or the Midtown Tunnel was much larger, that you need to make sure the back office works, that the processes work, that there are no hiccups at all on a massive expansion like that. And that's what I did 5 years ago. I come back, and all of a sudden everything it's working the way I had envisioned it back then. It's the same concept with the stations. Make it work, and then take it and roll it out.
So after you've done the pilot on the 33 stations, you can then do it for the other 440 odd stations. Is that correct? Hopefully, but I guess the question.
Theoretically, that is right.
The question I have is,
I'll look at the numbers. Some of the stations don't need to be renovated. So
one of the city's chief criticisms of these packages is that they are not targeted at some of these more higher trafficked stations. And so what I wonder is, what we heard today was it's being sent away for review, and hopefully it will come back next month, and perhaps some of the stations will change. If any of those stations that are put forward are the busiest stations, the ones that suffer from overcrowding, will you...
We're not ready for the busiest stations right now. We are not ready for them. What we've done, we've got some contractors who it cost more than the estimate, some contractors that are less than the estimate. Part of it is also making sure that we have the right contractors to be able to do this. It's a matter of trust and a matter of their ability. And so, you know, I haven't read, I understand information was passed out during the board meeting by the city representatives. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. But if the point is we need to do the biggest first, it's inconsistent with the approach that we have put together.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Matt Jablow with News 12 Long Island.
Matt, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
I'd like to follow up on the question about possible staff changes that you're considering at the LIRR. Are you considering, or would you consider, replacing the president of the railroad?
Not at this time.
Could you give us a sense of how you think he's doing in the job right now?
I've talked to Pat about what I think needs to happen there, and I will work with him. Ronnie Hakem and I both will work with him. He understands what needs to be done, and my hope and expectation is that it will get done. And I've seen some changes, you know, at least initially, with some movement within the railroad. You know, we got to work on, you know, one of the issues is communication, and not just the, you know, the wheels and the technical problems and the rolling of our rolling stock. So, you know, the answer to my question is, Pat, I'm going to work with Pat to fix this problem.
So you have not made a long-term commitment to him then?
He has a contract. He has his own long-term commitment with the MTA.
Other than communications, what are some of the other issues that you've communicated to him that must improve?
Well, you know, it's a sense of urgency in understanding that, you know, as I said a little bit a while ago, snow happens in New York. It's just one of those things, so you got to be prepared for it. Leaves fall in New York. I mean, we had some problems with the leaves falling down, and it causes problems on all railroads where when wet leaves get on the rail, it actually takes the round wheel and starts to flatten it out. Gets a little technical, but nonetheless, we know that. We got to get them cleaned. We got to do everything we can to possibly clean it up. In addition, I mean, these are pretty basic things, and things that were fully understood by everybody at the Long Island Railroad during the summer. And so it's not that long ago when News 12 and Newsday were saying, wow, look at the great job they did. That's exactly what I want to get back to. Pat did it then. Pat can do it now.
Greg?
Chairman, the Subway Action Plan has produced some data and some results. Are you satisfied with where it is? I'm sure you'll say there's always room for improvement. Signals seems to be not as large an improvement as other areas. But is that as good as it could get regarding signals? And what can you do? What do you need to produce higher numbers here?
You probably need to ask my daughter if I'm ever satisfied with performance. Look, once you get to a certain level, I want you to get to the next level and get to the next level. Every month it's been better, 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 and that's what I really engage in on. I want to be able to see consistent movement in the right direction, and that's where I'm seeing. When I went into it, I was asked a question in this room, you know, what do you expect to have by the end of December? How long will it be? And I answered at the time, I can't answer that until I get into it. And you're right. Some things have gotten better than others. Signals is still double-digit being better, but I wanted to, let's see if we can get it a little bit better. Look, for me, the most important thing is forward momentum, forward approach, making sure that every day something else happens to justify the amount of money that's being put into the Subway Action Plan.
Genius competition reveal a possible solution, and when might we hear some of those winning ideas?
I think the Genius, I don't know the exact date, this first quarter. So we've gone through a couple of rounds. There's more rounds later this week, actual interviews with the companies and presentations about what they do in the 3 different categories. One is about cars, one is about signals, the other is about communication. Missing one? Yeah, that's it, the 3. And we're going through that, and I'm looking forward to being able to, have the announcement made by the selection committee of who's won, or who's. And I can also tell you that when the money, the $3 million, has been given to us to be able to give to them from the state, so it's again not coming out of the coffers of the MTA. And then, and as I understand it, though I need to get better briefed on this, there may be some categories where we can't pick one, so we may end up splitting the money between one or two or more. I just don't know the answer to that.
Steve?
Just to go back to the ESI for a moment, are there any plans to include accessibility as part of any of the ESI stations, and if not, why not?
There's a separate accessibility away from the ESI stations on all of the other stations that are included in the $2.5 billion. And again, I'll get a breakout and be able to give it to you, well, actually to all of you, but in answer to the question from Danielle as well as yourself. Jose.
I'm going to pass, but
oh, no.
Thank you for respecting the back row because Stephen just asked the exact question I was going to ask. So, all right, well, in that case,
see you on the rails.
a lot of fun.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.